So, in Breath of the Wild, we have access to a very familiar place, the Arbiter's grounds. Now, y'all remember this from Twilight Princess, obviously, and yeah, it was an awesome dungeon. No cap, the location of the Mirror of Twilight too, so, you know, they use it as a prison for the worst of the worst baddies in Hyrule. And it's connected to the Spirit Temple from Ocarina of Time too, so, you know, there's a lot of history there. And now we're gonna get into a bit more history, you know what I'm saying? Check it out. The interlopers were in prison because they tried to take control of the Sacred Realm and get a hold of the Triforce. You know, and they had powerful magic and they had the Fused Shadow from the game, you know, from Twilight Princess. And once they were defeated, they were sent to the Twilight Realm, which is a parallel dimension to Hyrule itself. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's get into the point of this video. Now, alright, bear with me here. Access to the Twilight Realm in Breath of the Wild 2, or whatever it's called. This is of course going to make some wild timeline assumptions, which excludes the child timeline as a possibility since the mirror was destroyed, and I'm not going back to make up some situation to bring it back. So back when the game was first released, the big thing was what Zelda mentioned about the Twilight Realm.
Whether skyward bound, adrift in time, or steeped in the glowing embers of twilight, the sacred blade is forever bound to the soul of the hero.
But check it. What if she meant something a little bit different? Alright bro, I'm gonna get into some crazy theories, so you know what I mean, just stick with me. I kinda ish promise that it'll make some sense, so we'll see. The Twilight Realm, Twilight, and the Mirror of Twilight aren't things that exist in just one timeline. It exists in all three of them. You know what I'm saying? It's destroyed in Twilight Princess, but in the other timelines, it should still be intact. Alright, let me explain myself, bruh. In Twilight Princess, they explain how the interlopers started the battle to claim the Triforce in the Sacred Realm. Now, I would argue that this happened before the events of Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time, and you can tell by the statements about it being an ancient event, time long past, blah blah blah. And it also would confirm that those events exist within the other two timelines as well. So the Mirror of Twilight could very well still be out there. Now this ain't an argument for a downfall timeline or adult timeline. You know what I'm saying? I'm just giving ways that this could happen and what it could mean for the game. Now in Breath of the Wild, the Arbiter's ground does make an appearance. Now your mind would go straight to the child timeline, but since these grounds existed in all the games going by this theory, the hardest to explain would probably be the Wind Waker's timeline. So let's say you believe A, B, and C happened thousands of years ago when Hyrule was restored. You know, a lot of people make arguments because on top of mountains you have salt from ancient seas. You know, I mean there's evidence for all of them. Let's not get into that, you know what I'm saying? But let's say it was restored. The Arbiter's ground from Wind Waker during the Wind Waker would have been preserved under the sea, possibly like Hyrule Castle. But even then, it was flooded again, and this time the entire kingdom was submerged. You know what I'm saying? And obviously there are no Gerudo in Wind Waker, aside from Ganondorf. But if you look at the child timeline, you know, they actually left the desert and they settled in the Desert of Doubt. Now, they might not have went to the same place, you know, it's a different timeline, but it makes sense that they would leave their homes as well. So if Hyrule was restored one day and they eventually returned, they could have rebuilt, you know, such a place like that because it's important. And I do think down the line in the Wind Waker timeline that they did restore Hyrule, or they would restore Hyrule, because, you know, it's all fun and games, but at the end of the day, there's only one Hyrule. You can make new Hyrule all you want, but there's a lot of legacy there. There's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of stuff that they'll probably have to address. Something probably came up, blah blah blah. I don't know, man. I don't write the games. I'm just trying to give some context to this theory. So yeah, they could have returned to Hyrule eventually. You know, there's a lot of years between games, and they could have easily rebuilt such a place, especially if they found the mirror. The ruins in Breath of the Wild aren't exact to the Twilight Princess Arbiter's ground. It almost looks like it was rebuilt somewhere down the line, which makes sense. You know, I mean, they rebuild stuff in Hyrule all the time. How many castles have there been? You know what I mean? So it makes sense. And For it to have to be rebuilt in the first place, it makes sense that it would have first had to be destroyed. Now, in the Downfall timeline, the Gerudo aren't really there. You know what I mean? Now, in the Downfall timeline, the Gerudo aren't really there. You know what I'm saying? Nibiru has a town named after her for being a sage, but, you know, other members of that race, they ain't nowhere to be found. And, you know, this is after Ganondorf rose to power. But we know there were plans to overthrow him, so maybe they fled. You know, that would have been hard with Ganondorf being so powerful and all that, so he would probably have a tight grip on the tribe. They could have also been his army during his takeover attempts, you know what I mean, and lost their lives in battle, and then he had to use his demons and his monsters instead. Or maybe they tried to overthrow Ganondorf and they got wiped out. You know what I mean? That's something I feel like the Downfall timeline Ganondorf would have done to his people. Maybe not so much the Wind Waker Ganondorf, you know, he kind of had he was a little different. You know, he's been through some stuff, you know what I mean? But definitely the Downfall Ganondorf. And then there's also the Desert of Mystery, which is said to be what becomes of the Haunted Wastelands and Ocarina of Time. So yeah, so maybe those grounds still exist in the Downfall timeline, we just don't have access to it. Anyways, why have it in Breath of the Wild 2? With Ganondorf never having went to the Twilight Realm, they had time to flourish with their magic and their environment, you know what I mean? We see the Arbiter's ground in Breath of the Wild standing to some capacity, so I wouldn't count out that the Mirror of Twilight was placed back in that location. You know, you can see walking up to it what I'm talking about. You know, you walk in and there's a clear focal point of the Arbiter's grounds. I also believe there might be more underground, which kind of helps my theory out, because where do you see Ganondorf? Underground. You know, I feel like underground is gonna play a bigger role in the Breath of the Wild sequel. Anyway, I feel like the Mirror of Twilight was found, and maybe they built it back up and put it back in the Arbiter's ground, you know, right there in the center. You know what I mean? I feel like the Mirror of Twilight was found, and maybe they built it back up and put it back in the Arbiter's ground, you know, right there in the center. You know what I mean? And there could have been a time where the Twilight Realm was entered again, or at least opened. You know, if you look back at Twilight Princess, when they were going to send Ganondorf to the Twilight Realm, I mean, when they did send him, the sages opened it up. So maybe that has something to do with the 7 heroines of the Gerudo tribe, also called sages in the game. You know, maybe that was one of their big contributions to the world. You know what I mean? But yeah, there could have been a time where the Twilight Realm was entered again. I mean, 1,000 new games could fit in the gap between Breath of the Wild and the last games in their respective timelines anyway, so, you know, it does make sense. But I feel like the Arbiter's grounds were in Breath of the Wild for a reason. You know, what if it was discovered that the Twilight had lost their evil nature and they flourished? You know, they weren't evil in Twilight Princess. They were under someone's control. And they actually progressed a lot. They were doing pretty good for themselves. You know what I mean? You know, before Ganondorf got there. It could be that they could heal the severed ties between them and the world who cast them out. You know, I feel like this could really lead to 2 things. The first super dumb theory of mine being that some of them stayed in Hyrule. You know, made peace between the 2 kingdoms, and they were like, you know, the war that happened is over. We've moved on as a people. You know what I mean? It's 2020 or whatever year it is. So, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Well, you don't have to be imprisoned or trapped anymore because you're good people. You know what I'm saying? So maybe some of them came over to Hyrule. Never know. And like the Gerudo and other races, they could have changed over time, you know? They were powerful wielders of magic as well. And they could have tried to atone for the sins of their ancestors by helping the Hyrule they migrated back to. You know what I mean? And I'm saying, what if the Zonai tribe is what became of the Twilight who came back to Hyrule? Or maybe they bred with Hylians or another race, or even the Sheikah. Who knows? And the Zonai tribe was the result. Either way, I wouldn't be surprised if the Zonai were or are in any way related to the Twilight, Twilight, and that could explain where they've been. They could have been cast away in ancient times like the Sheikah, or maybe those groups were closer together in the past than they are now. Especially when you see some of the contributions they made when it came to shrines. So maybe they were closer, and they could have went and operated in the shadows, literally. I did always love when Midna popped out from Link's shadow. It was cool. That was a cool aspect to their powers. So you never know if that could have been used. They could still be there all along, and you just don't see them because they do have that magic. Or maybe if they were cast back away, they felt it was best to just go back to the Twilight Realm that they originated from. They have access to it, and the mirror still exists. The mirror has to be broken by the Queen of Twilight, and outside Twilight Princess, she hasn't been into the world yet, so the mirror has to still exist. The Mirror of Twilight is a powerful tool, so I wouldn't expect many people, probably not alive, to know much of anything about it. But it will be a great way to explore those characters as a race in the same way that we explore other races in the game. And at the same time, it can gain us access to an entirely different dimension. Literally, all we got to see from their realm was like 3 buildings in Twilight Princess on GameCube and Wii. You know what I mean? There's so much more we can see now, and especially with Breath of the Wild 2 using the same map, or whatever that means. This would be a good way to introduce a different version of Hyrule that's not just like Lorule or just a darker version of it. This can be something really special. You know what I mean? We can finally have a chance to explore it like we did all those other alternate worlds from the series, and it won't be a rehash of any sort. I feel like the Mirror of Twilight is an amazing plot device that can really lead to an amazing experience with the game when it releases. Alright, y'all, that's about it. Now, I'm aware that I probably have no clue what I'm talking about, and not many people will click on this video, you know what I'm saying? But for those who did, thank you for watching. I've thought about this theory for a while, but there was literally no one I could talk to about it in my life who would remotely care or know what I'm talking about. So that's why I made this channel. So thank all of y'all who watched it. Call me an idiot in the comments, tell me I made a drop of sense. I don't know, man, but thanks for watching. All right, I'll see you guys later. Be brave, stay wild. All right, peace.